Hey, welcome into a recruiting edition of the Husker247 Podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Director of Scouting here at 247 Sports, Andrew Ivins. And I wanted to bring in Andrew to talk about a guy that Nebraska has been chasing really since Matt Rhule arrived. He hired Philip Simpson, Cortez Mills, high school coach then at the time. Nebraska has been on Mills's radar. Mills has been on Nebraska's radar, however you want to phrase it, since December of 2022, and now it is December 2024, and the Huskers get to call Cortez Mills a commitment. And so I thought Andrew Ivins could kind of break down what that means. This is a guy that's been in the top 247 for almost the duration of his time period, kind of, like right in that 100 to 200 range, most of the time. What kind of receiver is Cortez Mills? What is Nebraska getting here?
Yeah, I think he's a guy that is going to offer some inside-outside versatility. You think about the future of Nebraska's offense, what it could be, and he's not someone that's going to blow you away. I think with his size or his speed, but the suddenness and the agility, it constantly shows up in his route running. 2 years ago at the Future 50 event, which is all the kind of top underclassmen, he really stood out in the one-on-ones and the routes on air. It was an elite group of wide receivers. And you're right, this is a kid that's been on the scene since his freshman year at Homestead High School, had over 1,000 yards as a junior, dinged up a little bit as a senior, didn't play the first, I think, month and a half. And then he kind of came on late for Homestead. And you pop on the senior tape, you're seeing a guy that's making contested catches. He's attacking all three levels. So I think he's a potential high volume target. I think he's a guy that you can utilize in these 3 and 4 wide receiver sets, and he can work the full route tree. He's a competitive individual. We've seen him on the camp circuit. We saw him on the 7-on-7 circuit. A guy where the football finds his way to him. So I think it's a nice signing day addition for Nebraska. And you think about, all right, Ja'Cory Barney, how he was utilized kind of in year one as a true freshman. He's another guy from Miami-Dade. I think Cortez Mills can also step in and potentially contribute, kind of year one and definitely by year two there in Lincoln.
Andrew, I know that you're more than familiar with Dana Holgorsen and his time, both Houston, West Virginia, and then, of course, he was a really talented coordinator before those head coaching stops. When you're talking about Ja'Cory Barney, Cortez Mills, the sort of wide receivers Nebraska wants to stack up, how does that picture kind of look when you also throw in Dylan Raiola at the quarterback spot as well?
Yeah, I mean, these are guys that can certainly work for him. And time out, can we talk about like Dana Holgorsen looking like Jimmy Buffett? I don't know. I think it was Dan Wolken wrote that in one of his USA Today columns, and I just haven't been able to shake that thought process. No, I mean, these are guys that have been catching the football and playing 7-on-7, since they were in middle school, and sometimes it's long before that. So they can be in an up-tempo offense, right? They understand, all right, high volume, push the pace. And I think the other thing that really stands out about Ja'Cory and Cortez Mills is at various kind of points, they took over games on Friday nights, and then you saw it kind of in best on best settings on that off-season circuit, right? Like whether it's a 7-on-7 tournament, whether it's, a camp, and I get it. Hey, it's not pads, but the more I've been doing this, you want to see these guys kind of like step up in those moments, because the ones that kind of shy away, they're the ones that go off to school. You see them in the transfer portal. All right, things aren't working out. Like I think they're football players, and for Raiola or whoever's throwing passes there, I mean, these are two potential weapons, and they're guys that can handle a high volume of targets, right? They can get involved. You can scheme things up to them, and they're both really good in catch and run situations.
One of the things that I always find kind of fascinating about the wide receiver position, maybe relative to any other spot on the football field, is there's no conformity to what makes like physically the makeup of a great wide receiver. You can have the Calvin Johnson types, you can have the Percy Harvin types, you can have those that fall in between. When you see guys like, and I'm just using them as examples because Ja'Cory Barney's already here at Nebraska, and Mills, is set to come to Nebraska. When you see guys like that, and they're different. Like Ja'Cory Barney is never going to have Cortez Mills' size. Mills probably isn't going to move exactly like Ja'Cory Barney. As an evaluator, when you just have a singular catch-all position like wide receiver and you have all these different body types, what are some of the traits that make guys kind of stand out that allow players like Barney and Mills to be in the upper echelon of a recruiting class?
Oh, Mike, I think this is like a great question. And to be honest, I think for us at 24/7 Sports in the scouting department, stacking and racking the wide receivers, I think it's the hardest position, right? And yes, evaluating quarterbacks is certainly difficult, but we only get so many spots inside the top 247. And our rankings are trying to reflect the NFL draft process. You're looking about, I think in recent years, we've seen an uptick, kind of like 35 to 40 wide receivers a year are getting selected. So, that's kind of the magic number for us. And then we'll have some guys as 4-stars on the outside. But as these cycles progresses, there's kids that are developing on different timelines. And you mentioned Cortez Mills, guy that's been ranked highly throughout. He's kind of slid back towards what I would call a day 3 projection. Does that mean we don't like the player? No, not necessarily. We've just found maybe some other wide receivers that, hey, we're going to bet on this guy. This is the guy that we're valuing a little bit more. And with Cortez Mills, normally you kind of want to see, all right, the multi-sport, is he a track guy? That's not Cortez. The other big one for me is, and this is kind of leaning on NFL draft trends, I want to see guys that play basketball. For some reason, that has really picked up. A lot of the guys getting drafted early on, super high these days, they're also basketball players. And if you think about it, spatial awareness and the fact that if you're playing hoops, right, you either got to go through someone to get to the basket or you're trying to defend them. So you get that lateral movement. And with Cortez Mills, right, all right, so he doesn't check the multi-sport box. We've never really got a true speed marker on him, but then you turn on the tape, all right, this guy's creating separation at the top of his routes, and he's doing it not only in the deeper third, but just that ability to get open. And that's something kind of bouncing ideas off and listening to Jim Nagy, who is the director of the Senior Bowl, who I think it's kind of a similar boat to us, right? He's not tied to an NFL team. He's just trying to get the best players in his game. And of course, I'm talking about the Senior Bowl there in Mobile. And something he said to me this offseason, all right, we want guys where you've seen it at the top of the route, they're sticking and they're getting open, and they've had a ton of success with those guys. And I think that kind of fits Cortez Mills, right? That's the reason why we've kind of stuck with him. He's going to go wire to wire, which is, believe it or not, extremely rare. A lot of new names surface. Guys,
very fluid process.
Yeah, guys come in at all different times, but for Cortez, I think that's what stands out about him. He just finds ways to get open. It's the mixing of the gears. He's got the nuances of that wide receiver position. And really, it's just a good feel for it.
Is one of the harder parts of the evaluation process trying to evaluate while ignoring what fit looks like? Because you're not projecting based on where these guys are actually signing. You're projecting based on their own athleticism. So if, a wide receiver signs of a program that doesn't necessarily pass the ball that much or whatever it is, you're not necessarily taking that into account when you're doing the recruiting evaluation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of fans and consumers just assume, all right, like, yeah, hey, this kid's going to this school. They're going to rank him there because they have a track record for developing certain individuals at that position. And, I'm going to be completely frank. And I tell our guys this all the time because it'll come up in calls. Hey, he's headed here. We know that they're really good. And just with where we're at with the transfer portal and the player movement and guys moving from place to place, like, you can't think through that lens. When we're ranking these individuals, those high school ranks, that's our long-term projection for them. And now at 24/7 Sports, all right, a guy's in a portal, you're going to see a different grade, right? That transfer grade, that's more kind of like an impact. All right, what is the rest of that high school career going to look like? But yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that you when we're talking about classes, all right, we like this guy as a fit. We think this position haul for Nebraska is really good. But at the end of the day, you can't bank on that kid being there for 4 to 5 years for the same coaching staff, the same scheme. I mean, the movement is at an all-time high in college football, and it's at all levels as well, right? From the group of 5 ranks to the Power 4, the top of the food chain, everyone seems to be moving around.
Cortez Mills is now the 3rd guy in the top 247, joining Malcolm Simpson and also Dawson Merritt. I want to get into Nebraska's class just a little bit while I have you here. And really what I kind of want to do is just ask your thoughts on what they have sort of done with the front seven in this class. I mean, you have some really intriguing defensive linemen, whether it's Cade Peterzak from North Dakota. I know that you recently have been studying Tyson Terry and came away impressed there. Malcolm Simpson's in the top 247. Right behind it, you have Christian Jones, who just falls outside of the top 247, Dawson Merritt. And then Pierce Mooberry, who's pretty exciting athlete in his own right here in the state of Nebraska. Just what do you feel like the Huskers have kind of done in that sort of the front seven linebacker defensive line area for a defense that continues to kind of evolve?
Well, they're getting athletic, right? And they're getting guys with developmental upside, which I don't think is surprising, right? With Matt Rhule kind of running the show there. And you look at Nebraska's defense this past season, I know Tony White's out. I mean, they just have guys that are twitched up and can certainly charge forward and move. They're very athletic there. They can run guys down. And I think this class, are any of them going to make an impact here in year one? Probably not. But, you look up 2 to 3 years down the line. All right, this group it certainly has kind of the ceiling where they can be impact defenders in the Big Ten. To me, Malcolm Simpson, a guy that we're kind of on the fence. All right, what do we want to do with him? And then the more you dig in, and there's a video of him out there running the basketball court and making a dunk in transition. It's like, okay, that's pretty rare to see for a guy that is believed to be hovering around 260 pounds. And I know he's a little sawed off kind of. I think sometimes you can get caught up in the green numbers, but man, he can push pockets there in the middle. He reminds me a lot of Zane Durant, who's at Penn State, right? Has had a big year for the Nittany Lions, kind of an undersized 3 technique, but the get off, that first step, it makes him extremely effective. And Zane Durant to me is like one of those evaluations where I go back, it's like, we should have been more bullish on this kid and thrown out the numbers. So I like Malcolm Simpson. I think with Tyson Terry and Cade, is it Peterzak?
Peterzak.
I got so many names out there. I mean, you're getting two like really physical dudes. Cade, you turn on the tape and he's just the shock power in his hands. And I know it's up in the Dakotas. It's not, the stiffest competition, but the trench play there is going to be as good as it is in some other parts of the country, right? You might not have the same individuals, but tough kids. Tyson Terry, I love the wrestling background. I think I told you before this, before we hit record, he's like a lot like Nash Hutchmaker, right? Like kind of like this big 300-pounder, 3-time state champ on the mat. He went 4.72 in the short shuttle at 298 pounds with a 187 split there in the 10-yard dash. And does that always show up on tape? I don't think so at times, but certainly you get him in that strength program. You put him in the crock pot. I think he could emerge as a key figure in the middle for Nebraska in the coming years.
Is there anything else that kind of jumps out to you about what Nebraska has sort of put together here in this 2025 class?
Yeah, I mean, Bryson Weber to me is like made in a lab for Matt Rhule, talking about the cornerback out of Texas. 4.54 in the 40-yard dash. He's got a 95 speed score from next gen prospects, and he's over 6'2" at that cornerback position. And there's this thing that tracking football, kind of one of these services out there, the PAI score, and 5.0 is perfect. It's pretty rare to come across a 5.0, but he's a 4.9 guy, and that's going to send off some indicators for us. Big fan of what he could be. You're going to bet on that length. You're going to bet on that speed. That's not surprising that, Nebraska obviously coveted him. I like the 2 kind of offensive linemen, Sean Hammerback out of South Dakota, another 3-sport athlete. I think it's going to take some time. He's going to need to put on the size, but he's athletic enough to protect the corner. And then, Juju Marks has been one of the more kind of unique prospects. At one point was billing himself as a defensive lineman. I don't know who inside his camp told him like, hey, like offensive tackles get paid. But I remember he was like at some 7-on-7 tournament in my neck of the woods in Florida. And I was asking him, he's like, no, I'm an offensive tackle all the way. I think what he put on tape as a senior, his ability to move, and obviously he's got the size. I mean, he lists himself at 6'7". He's closer to 6'5", that's fine. But, for someone that is probably 280 pounds, he moves well. He can find a mean streak like that. And then, the kind of the darling of the class, Dawson Merritt. I mean, what is he going to be at some point after a few years, right? He's kind of lean now, but I don't think he's going to be a hard gainer. He's got all that athletic juice in there, 34-inch arms. You kind of want to see that. I think he's someone that can offer on-ball and off-ball versatility. So, there's a reason why he's ranked where he is for us. Hopefully we get to see him at the Under Armour All-America game kind of in January. I believe he's slated to be there, and that's going to be a key evaluation for us. And then, the last one that I got to give a shout out to, and I know we were kind of bouncing some notes off on him, Connor Booth, at in-state prospect. I think he finished in the top 5 nationally in rushing yards. I mean, just what of a tough SOB. State title game, torn ligaments in the knee and the ankles. You always hear, okay, he's a one cut and go type of running back. To me, Connor Booth is like a one cut and I'm going to try to run you over type of running back. And, to me, Nebraska, it just kind of fits the program there. And is he going to ever be, a featured back? Probably not. But I think he's a special teams ace. I think he's a program guy. I know he's entertaining the idea of doing both sports there in Lincoln. And hey, in this current landscape, right, you're getting down to 105 scholarships, or 105 spots. We'll see where the Big Ten settles on the scholarship number. But just with all that player movement, like, you need guys that are going to be voices in your locker room that are going to want to be there. And you see it, man. Hey, turn on Texas, turn on Georgia. I mean, they have 2 former walk-ons that are making key contributions, 0-star recruits that are getting it done on multi-million-dollar rosters. And, just talking with some people in the personnel world, like, I think if you can find value in the right individuals, that's going to be a bit of a cheat code, right, as we get into this revenue sharing. And to me, from what I've seen from Connor Booth, I don't know him all that well. I've never talked to him, but he seems like one of those guys that you kind of want to bet on just being a face of a program.
Yeah, absolutely. Before you go, Andrew, I want to ask you something that has kind of been a shakeup around here relative to the coaches previous to Matt Rhule. We've seen a lot more freshmen, like true freshmen, and obviously Dylan Raiola going wire to wire, regular season, starting 12 games, basically unheard of at the Power 4 level.
Can I just say, like, kind of like exceeded my expectations? And like, obviously we ranked him as a 5-star prospect.
Mm-hmm.
We got a ton of exposure to him, but I will say, just from my, couch observations, like, I thought there was a chance it could go south pretty fast, right? And I think we had talked about it on a few podcasts before, and I just had some questions between the ears when adversity struck, and I thought how he kind of hung in there down the stretch. To me, he seems a little ahead of schedule, and I think that's a good thing for Nebraska fans. And now, obviously, I know they're going to have to hold on to him, and that's what it's going to be like with every big time quarterback these days. But I thought it was really encouraging what he showed, and I know there was peaks and valleys, but man, that's a difficult position to be in. And it's been a while since we've seen, I think, a true freshman kind of 5-star quarterback, him and DJ Lagway at Florida, that's kind of what we thought they were. And to be honest, kind of exceeded expectations a little bit.
We were sort of hoping that we would get a Florida-Nebraska bowl game so we could just have the true freshman battle, really kind of get that going. I don't know if they're going to be able to match up somewhere on that, though. I don't know how it quite lines up for either team.
Right, Pop-Tart Bowl in Orlando. Is that a Boston? I don't know if that's
I don't know that it's a Big Ten tie-in, but I know that I would like to attend the Pop-Tart Bowl, maybe a little bit more than the Duke's Mayo Bowl. But they kind of finish up, like with Raiola, and then you have Vincent Shavers, you have Willis McGahee, and you have Ja'Cory Barney, and getting all of these true freshmen on the field, even if guys like Shavers and McGahee aren't starting. Carter Nelson isn't starting, but Nebraska is playing them. What do you think the value of that is for both recruiting future players and also trying to retain in this transfer portal era?
I think it's huge, right? And, I'm a big proponent in recruiting through the high school ranks in developing guys. So this is going to sound like a little opposite, but Man, I just don't see much value in redshirting players, right? If there is the chance where they can contribute in some type of way, whether that be on special teams, whether that is spelling here and there, I think you got to do it, because what are you really trying to? There's the chance and the odds of you getting that extra year of eligibility. I mean, they're very slim, right? Just with guys that are moving from school to school, and now you could certainly get that redshirt year. It could come back to you through a guy you add through the transfer portal, but we'll see if they change the rules. I know that's been kind of tossed out there. Hey, you got 5 years to play five, or whatever the NCAA settles on. But I do think kids want to play. And I think in a case of going full circle here, right, Cortez Mills, I mean, he's very familiar with Vincent Shavers. He's very familiar with Ja'Cory Barney. He has to have heard through the grapevine, all right, I will have a chance to play relatively early. So I do think that's important. And, I think Nebraska, you look at this class, I don't know what guy I'd kind of put my thumb on as like, all right, like year one, watch out for that dude. But you would think the odds are there's one of them out there. And I totally forgot to talk about maybe my favorite prospect in the class. Hey, Jeremiah Jones out of Kentucky.
That's my bad, because I had a question in my head queued up and then I got off on something else. So that's on me.
I just pulled up my scouting report here, and I'm like, one of the more unique evaluations in the cycle, a legitimate chess piece that can project to a variety.
He's built like a lineman, Andrew. He was at the Wisconsin game, and he's standing next to Kelvin Obit, who is an 2026 lineman from Idaho. He's absolutely as big as this guy. Yeah. And he can play in the secondary. Like it's nuts.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can make a case he's a wide receiver. I think you can make a case he's a tight end, a linebacker, a safety. And where I think the ceiling might be the highest is edge rusher. And it's one of the more fun evaluations. And to be honest, like, he's a guy we've kind of talked about, all right, putting him in the top 247, and we're going to finalize the rankings there in January, and we've left some kind of leeway to see what we want to do with one of these guys. But he's one where you just keep coming back, and it's because it's the height, weight, speed, right? Like, if you're going to miss big. And we'll see. Excited to kind of follow his career and his trajectory. And I think he's one of those guys where you could see him on the field. I think my best bet would probably be Malcolm Simpson on maybe the back end of a rotation, or Tyson or something like that. But there are some certainly exciting prospects in the class.
All right, Andrew, appreciate your time as always. We know it's really busy this week, especially the first December